who are allowed to get away with teaching the history with maps that they invent or maps that are not historically accurate because they have a political view. Not that that political view can't be discussed, but that they do so with such an agenda that it doesn't provide for the kind of deep inquiry. It's a real concern, and students are smart and they catch it. And that's why not only can they not feel like they walk away from a Jewish education or a university education only to read an article in Haaretz or something later to find out, wait a second, I didn't know this was going on. We have to take very seriously, and I want to relate to John's point about wrestling. We've said through Birthright, we have an engagement strategy. We're going to introduce a lot of people into the birthright conversation. And we've said we need an advocacy strategy because we recognize that there are some folks out there with ill intent, and we need to address those BDS people and not merely just do it. But what about this center in the middle? What is our commitment to an investment to a serious a curriculum and dialogue? And you're right, I think, Ami, that it's not necessarily barriers, and maybe we have to build the kind of forums that allow and showcase the kind of deep discussions that don't shame people, particularly students, for asking questions that are on their mind or of great concern, but actually allow Jewish educators to think that it is part of their mission, part of their training, part of their job to be able to facilitate those discussions, not only facilitate their own views on the Israel issue, which unfortunately I want to share is also one of the problems that is out there. So I think we need to look at some kind of, not a universal curriculum, but we need to create, and I think this can be done not only top down, I think it could be done bottom up. And we should be having the kind of forums, and maybe there is something to be learned from the lessons of the early Zionist debates. Maybe we can recapture some of that by saying that having deep discussions that include disagreements, that include views sometimes even that we don't want to hear, will actually make the conversation deeper, richer, and more authentic.
I don't think that this is a left-of-center conversation. I think what's not here are people who aren't willing to listen. I'm not here to represent my personal ideology. I'm here to say that the way forward is to allow conversation to be had. And you know, and that's more what I want to push out there, is that, you know, it's not about cutting, it's not right or left. It's about opening space where it needs to be opened and creating safe space.
I would just say, in terms of thinking about this question of what a curriculum, what this education would be, I mean, I think it seems to me the standard should be that there should be no course offered or program offered within the American Jewish community that deals with Israel that does not have Palestinian voices. You simply can't have any pretension towards a serious education about the issue without hearing from Palestinian voices, and that means you're going to hear from non-Zionist voices. It means you're going to hear, there were also plenty of Jewish non-Zionist or anti-Zionist voices too, and I think it's precisely if you want to have your young students be able to make the case for a Jewish democratic state, that they should have heard those voices. Because in fact, they will only be, I think, effective advocates for a Jewish democratic state if they understand the arguments against it, and they also understand the human pain that is involved in those people who have suffered from the creation of a state that for us has been such a miracle.
Can I ask, I mean, not that we have any influence over the Palestinian American community, but would you agree that that in reverse needs to happen as well?
I don't think that I'm sure that you're right that the Palestinian organizations are not giving Zionism a fair shake. That's probably entirely true, and they should. But it seems to me we should have our own standards about intellectual honesty that is not dependent on what anyone else does.
I just want to say thank you to Jewish Federations for allowing, hosting this conversation, for everybody in the audience for participating. Hopefully, if you visit JTA.org, you can see the conversation continue, read Peter's book, and kudos to Hillel and the Israel Action Network.
We're now standing after the discussion here at the GA, and I think that many people in this room felt that the most poignant question or comment raised was by Dana Corin, who's a student at the University of Maryland. And I'm going to tell you what I heard. You tell me if I got it right. You are Israeli. You grew up in a very pro-Israeli, pro-Zionist home. And somewhere along the way, in your own studies, you learn things that make you feel that in some way your early Jewish and Zionist education betrayed you. That there were things you were taught and took for granted as true, which you now feel were less than true. That's the comment you made to this room. And no one was able to give you a follow-up question. And so there are questions that the audience has. Can you give us one or two examples of the things that hurt you the most, that you feel are the most important distortions? I don't know if you want to say they're lies, but they were less than the complete truth, or maybe not truth at all. Give me one or two examples of the things that you now feel commonplace misunderstandings that Jewish education tends to feed those of us who grew up in the American Jewish world and in the Israeli world, which really are untrue.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to clarify myself. But I think the most fundamental thing that just comes to mind is just the map of Israel itself that we're shown growing up. I lived in an apartment with a couple of girls last semester, where one of the girls was very, very Zionist, and another one of the girls was involved with J Street U, two opposing organizations. And the girl who was in J Street, we had a map on our wall of Israel, Gdola, the whole country, including the West Bank and Gaza, and that's the map that we're shown every day, growing up in Israel. And the girl who was involved with J Street was very against this map, and she wanted us to take it down. This was when I first got to college, and I didn't really know anything yet, and I didn't understand how could she possibly have anything wrong. This is the map of Israel. This is all I've ever known. And then at that point, I had not even been told that there was any kind of debate about what the map of Israel would even look like. And the fact that the map of Israel might be something different than just that there might be a whole segment cut off, and maybe who knows in how many years that's even a debate. So that's the very first thing that comes to mind, is that even what Israel looks like on the globe is not even what I thought they would look like.
That's a very powerful example. I want you to know, in America, we're not shown that map. In America, the map is always the map of the Green Line. The West Bank is clearly delineated, as is Gaza. So we did not have that experience. Is there any experience of untruth that the American Jew shared or shares with you? Can you give me any other example of something you feel, oh my goodness, I thought that my entire life, and now I know it's not true?
I guess the only other thing that can come to mind, I guess, is a very specific example, is in terms of, how did Israel come to be in the first place? And I think a lot of the narrative is just very distorted.
Give me an example.
For example, how did the Palestinians leave Palestine? Did they leave by choice, or did they get kicked out? I've been told by many of the programs, that I honestly feel like I'm not sure if they purposely meant to distort the facts, but I've read other sources and courses that I've taken that have said that most of them were forced out, whereas my whole life I was told that either they left or they weren't even there in the first place. And that was a very hurtful point for me, because I think that if we're going to accept any sort of peace agreement, if we're going to try to understand the Palestinians in the first place, we need to understand that, yes, they were there, and yes, they were forced out.
In your mind now, the majority of Palestinians, the majority of Arabs who were living inside Israel on May 14th, 1948 or thereabout, in your mind, most of them, the only reason they left was that they were forced out?
I don't know for sure. I can't say, but I want to say that, that what I was told was that they left. Their governments told them to leave. I don't think that's the whole story.
Is it part of the story?
It's definitely part of the story, but I know that it's not.
It's
the
not
whole
the whole story.
It's
Okay.
not the whole story.
Okay. What would you like to see Israel do in terms of the Palestinian population on the West Bank?
What I would want, ideally, just doesn't match up with what I know it has to happen. And I believe that that all of the territory that Israel controls right now should belong to the Jewish people, but I know that that's not a realistic solution, and it's not a just one. The Jewish people need to have a state of their own, that I'm willing to give up parts of that territory that we have now in order to make that a reality, because I believe that as long as the occupation continues, that such a peace agreement just isn't going to happen, and that Israel, it's in Israel's best interest to have a Palestinian state, because as long as Israel, as long as this situation continues, Israel is either going to have to choose between being democratic and being Jewish, and that's not an option for me. That is not something that I want to choose between.
Are your parents still in Israel?
No, we live here.
Do you have any family in Israel?
Yeah, everyone else.
Okay. When you talk to them, do most of those members of your family agree with you?
They have legitimate security concerns, and I would share those also in terms of how do we actually take that idea that we believe in, how do we make it into realistic truth, because I think there's a lot of mistrust, and it's hard for me as someone who grew up in America to say that we can just trust and withdraw, because clearly that has not worked out in the past. So I can't really say for them, but they would be concerned. My uncle lives in Hadera, which is about you can see the hills of Judea and Samaria from his porch. So I would understand why he would be a little uncomfortable with such with the idea. So.
But it sounds like you would be uncomfortable also. Most Israelis say to me, we are prepared to make territorial compromise. We are prepared to have a Palestinian state on the West Bank with a Palestinian people who want genuinely to live with the state of Israel in peace. We would live side by side. And peace doesn't have to mean we're buddy-buddy, but it does mean that no child, either Palestinian or Israeli, has to walk in fear, and that no parent, Palestinian or Israeli, worries for the danger of their child because of either a Palestinian attack or an Israeli attack. That's what peace means. Most Israelis say to me, if you could guarantee me, if I believed that the Palestinians were ready to make that kind of peace, I would be happy to make territorial compromises and tear down virtually all of the settlements that have been built on the West Bank. That's what Israelis say to me. Do you think I'm being misled, or do you think that what I hear represents mainstream Israeli thinking?
I think that definitely represents Israeli mainstream thinking.
Okay. Well, maybe next year you'll be on a panel.
I hope so.
Dana Corin, thank you so much for the time. And again, this is the young woman who, again, for many people here, asked the most important question or made the most important point, and it's so kind of you to give us some time. Thank you. I wish you all the best. Go through it.